The Ace of Kings by Dan Levinson. Prologue. The Fall of the Red Lion. Bartholomew de Vere shoved his way through the crowded plaza outside the golden-domed palace of Tal Kayar. He clutched an infant girl wrapped in a tan wool blanket, her cries drowned by the murmuring throng and the rain that slapped the pavement. Plumes of greasy black smoke choked the air. Portions of the palace still burning in defiance of the downpour. Days ago, the proud red lion flag of Ibarra had fluttered atop the thick sandstone pillars that flanked the plaza, but those had been torched, every one. In their place stood banners of a fiery eye imposed over a blazing sun, set upon a field of white. A low drumbeat sounded, drawing closer. The girl squirmed in Bartholomew's arms. The palace's patterned bronze doors yawned open, and a procession spilled forth. Men and women in voluminous white robes, bare-armed spearmen in ceremonial bronze breastplates. A woman was dragged forth, her hands and ankles bound with chains. The soldiers prodded her towards a wooden scaffold which stood dark and ominous atop the palace steps. There, a noose swung pitilessly. The woman walked towards the scaffold, and though small and slender, she had such regal bearing that she seemed to tower over the plaza. The citizens wailed and stretched out their hands to her. She smiled back at them, her emerald eyes warm, welcoming like an embrace. She ascended the platform, stood unwavering as the rope was pulled tight around her neck. "Fatima," Bartholomew whispered. The drums grew louder still. A tall man with midnight hair strode forth, Grand Vizier Fayyad. At his appearance, the multitude tossed with fury. They cried out for justice. Balancing the girl in one arm, Bartholomew reached beneath his heavy brown cloak. Fingering the polished wooden handle of a flintlock pistol, he drew the gun. Suddenly, Fatima's gaze locked on his, picking him out amid the crowd. Somberly, she shook her head. A small cry of grief escaped Bartholomew. The vizier pulled the scaffold lever, the platform opened beneath Fatima's feet, and she plunged. The rope pulled taut. The snap of her neck echoed across the plaza. Silence fell. Lightning flashed across the sky. Rain smacked against stone. Thunder boomed and rolled, and the people howled, their heartache and anger spiraling up to the roiling heavens. They surged toward the scaffold, and the vizier's soldiers marched forward, meeting the crowd with the butts of their spears, breaking noses, cracking skulls. Even so, the shouts did not stop, and Bartholomew joined them, bellowing until his throat felt sharp and hoarse and raw. The flintlock pistol dangled loosely at his side. He stared at Vizier Fayyad. As if sensing his attention, the vizier stared back. Then he noticed the girl in Bartholomew's arms and began to shout. "Damn!" Bartholomew turned and shoved his way through the throng, away from the palace, away from where the body of Fatima bin Shazari hung still and lifeless. The girl bawled and shivered against his chest. Fayyad's men waded through the churning mass of people in pursuit. Bartholomew felt a hand clamp down on his shoulder. He whirled to face one of the soldiers. He pressed his pistol into the man's unarmored armpit. "Maker, let the gunpowder be dry," he prayed. He squeezed the trigger. Bang! The soldier fell to his knees. The crowd shrieked and scattered like sand tossed into the wind. Bartholomew tried to run, but the wounded soldier grabbed onto his leg. "Please," the man begged, bloody froth bubbling from his lips. "The girl, she will destroy us all." He collapsed, dead. "How?" Bartholomew demanded. "What harm could one child do?" But the corpse held no answers. The only response was another flash of lightning, another boom of thunder. In disgust, Bartholomew tossed aside his spent pistol, and he ran. The rain fell harder, pounding with such force it seemed to yearn to crack the very earth. Here and there lay the unmoving bodies of men, fallen members of the loyalist resistance, their blood running along the cobblestones, tinging the floodwaters red. Squalls howled. Stone lions looked on with shattered stares, their once proud countenance hacked away. Bart tried to hide among the fleeing crowd, but the people quickly dissipated, shuttering themselves up inside their tall sandstone brick homes and apartments, their cloth or wood-slat window shades pulled tight. Even the main bazaar with its countless stalls and tables stood abandoned. Fruit and fish and shards of pottery littered the street, broken lutes, ruined clothing, muddy, rain-soaked silk. "Kester!" someone yelled. Then, in Bartholomew's tongue, "Stop!" He spared a glance behind him. One of Fayad's men raced after him, brandishing a curved scimitar. Bartholomew dashed onward, but then a second man stepped out from a side street, barring the way. "We have no quarrel with you," the man said, his Abaran accent lilting. "Hand us the girl, and you may live." "Leave us be," Bartholomew replied, "and you may live." With a snarl, the man charged. Cradling the girl in one arm, Bartholomew cleared his short sword from its dark leather scabbard. He flowed toward the attacker ahead, his steps fluid like water, his blade a blur. He slashed his foe across his unarmored belly, spilling his guts to the pavement. The other man rushed Bartholomew from behind, the tip of his scimitar flicking like a viper's tongue. Bartholomew turned, whipped the soaked folds of his heavy cloak, tangling his enemy's blade, and then ran his own sword through the man's chest, puncturing the thin ceremonial armor like paper. For a moment, the Abaran gasped and spluttered. He reached towards the girl, tucked in the crook of Bartholomew's arm, his dying throes contorting his hands like claws. Then his eyes rolled upward, and he slid off Bartholomew's sword, crashed to the ground, blood spread in a widening pool around him. Panting, Bartholomew wiped his blade clean on the man's trousers and returned it to its sheath. He looked west, down wide avenues flanked by tall, square buildings of golden sandstone. Further onward lay the port where his ship had awaited. But before he could take another step, he heard nearby voices shouting in Abaran, accompanied by heavy, booted footsteps. "Maker's hell," he cursed. He retreated into a nearby alleyway while the soldiers stormed through the streets behind him. For a time, he wandered the city's warren of twisting back roads. Sopping wet trash lay scattered about. Bedraggled beggars extended their hands for coins, as if oblivious to the madness around them. Wind howled through the narrow passages, whipping dust and dirt through the thick, misty air. The girl continued to cry. "Hush now," Bartholomew said. He smoothed back her chestnut hair, touched her olive cheek. "I'll see you to safety. I will." At this, the girl's green eyes met him. Her tears ceased, replaced with innocent wonder. With a tiny hand, she reached out and touched his whiskered face, smiling. With that smile, she resembled her mother so. He drew her close and hurried on. It was not long before he caught the scent of the ocean's salt air. He turned a corner. There, beyond the walls of two buildings that framed the alley exit, lay the harbor. Great ironclad sky ships with massive rotor-topped masts bobbed in their moorings amid the tempest. His own ship, the Beatrice, painted garish orange and yellow, disguised as a merchant vessel, stood 100 feet away. As he stepped into the open, he glimpsed a flicker of movement in his periphery, heard a whistle. Desperately, he ducked. A wicked axe sliced through the air where his neck had been. Holding the girl tight, Bartholomew darted back a safe distance and again drew his sword. Before him stood a muscled, bare-chested man with a shaved head. The man sneered and extended his weapon toward Bartholomew, and it shimmered strangely, as if made up of glowing dust motes. Suddenly, those motes collapsed into a mass of liquid light which writhed and formed a new shape. A spear. "Conjurer," Bartholomew hissed. The conjurer hurled the spear. It tore through the air, and Bartholomew dove to the side, shielding the little girl with his body. His shoulder smacked against the pavement, sending a jolt down his arm. His blade spun from his grasp across the cobblestones and out of reach. He staggered back to his feet, dashed towards his ship. Yet before he could manage 10 steps, Fayad's men poured into the harbor from all directions, surrounding him. Their weapons drawn, lightning blazed overhead, thunder rumbled. A shadow fell over the port. A massive steel-plated skyship roared in, its black lacquered hull painted with a single word: Liberty. On the ship's prow stood a lone man, seemingly impervious to the storm, though barely visible amid the gloom. His head was thrown back as if laughing. "Sieg Cyril," Bartholomew gasped in relief, as if the newcomer could hear him. "I told you not to follow me, and thank the Maker you never listen." Boom! The Liberty's cannon spouted fire, setting the sky alight. The Abarans leapt back as shells blasted the ground, the eruption spitting cobblestones across the harbor. Bartholomew broke into a desperate run toward his own ship, ignoring the sting as stone shards cut across the back of his exposed neck and arms. As he reached the Beatrice, the sailors aboard extended the wooden gangplank. "Captain," they shouted. "I swore I'd return, didn't I?" Bartholomew yelled back. He boarded, the deck creaking beneath his boots. His crew gathered around, soaked to the skin, grinning at the sight of him. "Now keep those bastards off us," he said. "Let's get out of here." "Leave it to the bloody ace of kings to save the day," muttered ashen-haired Silver Sidney Trost, Bartholomew's first mate, with a glance at the skyship Liberty. "Be glad he did," Bartholomew said. "Who's the little one?" Trost squinted at the girl in Bartholomew's arms. "An orphan," Bartholomew said. "I couldn't leave her in the street to die." "Ever sentimental, Captain," Trost said with a dark laugh. Explosions continued to rock the port. The Liberty's bombardment held most of the Abarans at bay, though what few made it through were dispatched by the Beatrice's crew, armed with crossbows, flintlocks, and rifles. "Take the helm, Sid," Bartholomew said. "Aye, aye." Trost dashed off toward the prow. Soon the ship's engines issued a powerful rumble, the entire vessel vibrating. Overhead, the main rotor creaked and then turned, rain pattering off its surface. The Beatrice lurched and rose from its place among the piers. Water streamed from its hull. As it ascended toward the gray, stormy swells above, Bartholomew hurried below deck. He walked the tight corridors, lit by lamps in iron brackets, to his private cabin, furnished with a lone reading lamp covered in maps and letters, and a large bed bolted to the floor. There he wrapped the little girl in a warm, dry blanket, finding that she had already drifted off to sleep. He lay her on the bed and then sat beside her and stroked her wispy brown hair with his thumb. "We'll need something new to call you," he said. She was such a tiny thing, too small by far to have suffered through what she had. "What do you think of Andra?" he asked. "It was my grandmother's name. She was strong, like you." At this, the little girl cooed in her sleep. "Andra," Bartholomew repeated. "My dear little auntie. As long as I am here, no harm will befall you. I swear it."